As artificial intelligence reshapes our world at an incredible pace, one critical question looms over everything. Who actually gets to make the rules? And right now, what we're seeing on the global stage is this fascinating contest between two completely different philosophies for governing AI. Think of it as a strict rulebook versus a collaborative playbook. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the technological crossroads we find ourselves at. Then, we'll dive deep into the European rulebook and contrast it with the Delhi playbook. After that, we'll put them side by side to really understand the differences. And finally, we'll consider what this all means for our shared future. Okay, so to really get a handle on today's debate, we first have to appreciate just how quickly the global conversation around AI governance has evolved. I mean, it's gone from a pretty niche technical concern to a central issue of geopolitics in just a few years. If you rewind just a little bit, the first major summit at Bletchley Park was almost entirely focused on safety, managing those big hypothetical risks of future superintelligence. But the dialogue grew up fast. The Seoul Summit broadened that scope to include innovation. Then the Paris Summit pulled back the curtain on the fierce geopolitical competition simmering underneath. And this all led to New Delhi, where the focus made a huge and decisive shift to socioeconomic impact, asking the really practical question of how AI can actually benefit everyone, especially in the developing world. All right, let's turn to the European Union's approach first. And honestly, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's been watching. It's a really logical next step for the EU, which has a long history of focusing on digital rights and data protection. Think of GDPR. They have now created the world's first comprehensive, legally binding framework for AI, a true rulebook.
Now, this is the crucial point to understand. The EU AI Act is not a set of polite suggestions. It is what lawyers call hard law. And that means it creates legally binding obligations for anyone who wants to develop, deploy, or sell AI systems inside the massive European market. And yes, it comes with very real, very sharp teeth for breaking those rules.
The core logic of the Act is actually quite elegant. It organizes every AI system into a four-tiered risk pyramid. At the very top, you have systems that are deemed an unacceptable risk. Those are just banned, full stop. Below that, high-risk systems, think medical devices or critical infrastructure, face incredibly strict regulations. Then you have limited-risk systems, like chatbots, which simply have to be transparent about what they are. And at the bottom, minimal-risk AI, like a spam filter, is pretty much left alone. And the Act gets very specific about what it considers an unacceptable threat. We're talking about things like government-run social scoring systems, scraping the entire internet for facial images to build databases, or using emotion recognition AI in your school or your workplace. These things are simply off the table. And you better believe the EU is serious about enforcement. The penalties here are severe. Fines can go as high as 35 million euros, or, and this is the big one, 7% of a company's total global annual turnover. That's a number specifically designed to get the attention of even the biggest tech companies on the planet. So now let's pivot to a fundamentally different way of thinking. This is the New Delhi playbook. It's an approach that was shaped directly by the needs of the global South, nations that are absolutely determined to make sure this AI revolution creates opportunities for them and not just for a handful of companies in Silicon Valley. Instead of hard law with all its penalties, the New Delhi Declaration is a form of soft law. It doesn't impose rules that are legally binding. What it does instead is rely on voluntary cooperation and political consensus to guide how nations and organizations behave. It's about promoting shared principles, not enforcing strict compliance. The whole philosophy behind this playbook is captured perfectly in this quote from its opening. The core idea is simple but powerful. The incredible promise of AI can only truly be fulfilled if its benefits are democratized, if they're shared across the globe, not just hoarded by a few wealthy nations or powerful corporations. The declaration itself is built around these 7 core pillars, or chakras. And you can see this is a totally different approach from the EU's focus on risk. The EU is focused on preventing harm. These pillars are focused on actively building capacity. They're about democratizing access to computing power, using AI for economic growth, building up human skills. It's really a blueprint for development, not just a list of regulations. So, there you have it, 2 profoundly different visions for how we should govern AI. How do these 2 powerful, competing ideas really stack up against each other when you put them head to head? Well, the difference really comes down to this simple metaphor. The European Union has written a rigid rulebook. Everyone has to follow it, and they have to follow it to the letter.
By contrast, the New Delhi Declaration offers a collaborative playbook, a collection of strategies and principles that different nations can adapt to fit their own unique situations.
This table lays out the distinctions so clearly. You look at legal force. The EU Act is binding. The Delhi Declaration is voluntary. What's the primary goal? For Europe, it's about mitigating risk. For the Delhi Coalition, it's about building capacity. How about enforcement? The EU uses massive fines. The Delhi approach has no formal enforcement body at all. And their views on innovation couldn't be more different. The EU sees it as something that has to be managed cautiously, while the Declaration sees it as a direct result of open access and shared resources. Now, even though it wasn't legally binding, the New Delhi Declaration achieved something pretty remarkable. It was endorsed by this incredibly broad and diverse coalition of 91 nations and international organizations. That sent a really powerful signal that there's a huge global appetite for this alternative approach. And what's just fascinating is who signed on. This coalition actually bridged the usual geopolitical divides. It included both the United States and the European Union. But here's the most significant part. The largest single block of signatories came from the global south. This wasn't some mandate passed down from on high. This was a broad-based consensus driven by the real-world developmental needs of the majority of the world's nations. So, at the end of the day, what does this clash of philosophies really mean for the future of artificial intelligence and, well, for all of us? Well, it seems pretty clear we are not heading toward a single unified set of rules for AI. Not anytime soon. Instead, it looks like we're entering a future defined by a kind of dual-track system. On one track, you have the EU building a highly regulated market based on safety and fundamental rights. And on the other track, you have a global coalition pushing for open collaboration and shared access to technology. These two worlds are going to have to figure out how to coexist. And that leaves us with a really provocative final question. Will these two parallel tracks eventually merge, leading us to some kind of shared global ethic for AI? Or are we actually witnessing the creation of a permanently divided digital world with different rules, different values, and different power structures for different parts of the globe? The answer to that question is going to define so much of the 21st century.